it's Dr. Earl, founder and executive director of Therapy for Black Kids. Welcome back to our next episode in our Back to School series. First, I want to thank you all for watching our episodes and for sharing them with your friends and family members. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and also email us at therapyforblackkids@gmail.com if you want to share topic ideas or other things that you would like us to discuss on our channel. So in today's episode, Jamaya and I are talking a little bit more about a somewhat sensitive, maybe even controversial topic. Today we are talking about hair discrimination or Black hair and what it means to a Black identity. And I wanted to have this conversation because I know that a lot of Black kids are impacted by policies at school or in their community that make it difficult for them to actually exist and have natural hair. And so I hope you enjoy the episode. Do comment, let us know if you have experienced this with your family and how you've navigated this particular challenge. Hey, Dr. Earl, executive director and blah, blah, blah. Start it over. I have Jamaya joining me again. So I have another topic that I want to talk about. And so I know that you've been going to the beauty salon, getting your hair done to go back to school. And so what made you decide to get your hair, I guess, straight?
Okay, so what made me decide to get my hair straight is that, like, whenever I feel that since I'm going to like middle school, I wanted to get my hair straight because all throughout the years of elementary, I was just like natural, but I feel that I should do a change and get my hair straightened.
Okay, so try something different. So a new school, new environment, switch it up with your hair. And so I know that your hair was natural before. And so like, do you want to go back to natural at some point, or do you want to try to keep it straight for a little while? Like, what do you think about that?
I like natural, but then I like straight. So like, I feel that it's like half and half, 50-50. I keep it straight for some time and then I go back to natural.
Okay, so what does it mean for you to have natural hair? Like, what do you like about natural hair?
I feel that your natural hair is just your natural beauty, and like you should embrace it, and you shouldn't be like afraid to embrace it. And we all have good hair. We all have beautiful hair.
Okay, that's good. So you know, like, it's sometimes been like hard for people to like have natural hair because of like being treated differently, like at school and at work. And you know, I used to have my locks a long time ago when you were much younger, and then I cut it off, and so now I'm growing it back. And so for me, it's about like connecting to like my identity as a Black person and having natural hair. So that's why I like to grow my locks back. Hey guys, welcome back. This is Dr. Earl, and today I am excited to have a special guest join me to talk about our next topic in our Back to School series. And so today I have Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka joining me. She is a licensed psychologist, hairstylist, founder and CEO of PsychoHairapy. She's also the owner of Mayat Psychological Services and provides therapy in New York, DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Great. So I just want to dive in. I know I want to respect your time. And so before we get into the questions, maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself and about your work.
Okay. Yeah. So my passion is related to psychotherapy. I made up the word, right? Once you get a PhD, you can make up words. So psychotherapy is using hair as an entry point into mental health care. And so I discovered my passion for hair at a very young age. I always loved doing people's hair. At family cookouts, I'd have a lawn chair out there and just style my relatives' hair. And then in college, I always loved doing my classmates' hair and would have people come to my dorm room, but I didn't charge people. I just loved the process and the conversation. And so in terms of my career path, that I remember talking to my Aunt Brenda on the phone one day. She's now an ancestor, and telling her that I loved hair so much, but I also love psychology. And so she said, well, why can't you do both? And I thought, I don't think she was telling me to do both at the same exact time, but that's the way I made sense of it and thought I can do hair and therapy together. So that was the birth of my own sort of career path and journey. So I did want to tell that story to show how I arrived to this moment and even this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to one, understand your journey and story, but also I think as we've been having a lot of conversations around like beauty shops and barber shops and like mental health awareness, that you can sort of carve out your niche and also contribute to that conversation about how we think about hair and how it's important to us, but also how it relates to our mental health. And so in our series, we've been talking about this, and one of the things that came up was about sort of how natural hair is important to our identity, and particularly I think for Black women and Black girls. And so I'm curious about what your thoughts are on, how important is Black hair to Black people and their identity? And why do you think like there still continues to be like some stigma around natural hairstyles?
Great question. Yeah, there's a big connection between our hair and mental health, but also a big connection between our hair and our identity. To some degree, our hair represents a complex language system, right? I can tell certain things about you based on your locks. And you might be able to tell certain things about me based on how I'm styling my hair in this wash and go style, right? That natural hair hasn't always been seen as beautiful in this country, right? When we think about Western or Eurocentric ideals of beauty, it's usually long, straight, sometimes blonde hair, but long, straight hair. And so our hair doesn't tend to grow long and straight. Our hair grows up and out. And so recognizing that hair to some degree has been weaponized, right? That it can actually prevent people, if they wear natural hair, from getting a job. It can actually prevent us from having access to certain housing opportunities, but especially it's been a lot in the news that hair and having natural hair can be used to prevent someone from going to a certain school or graduating from a certain school or a picture day at school or playing in a sport at school. And so that because it's so connected to our Blackness, that it actually is connected to discrimination and racism. Not that there's anything wrong with our hair, but the way that larger society views it as unprofessional or unkempt, when this is how our hair grows out of our heads naturally. I think it's very controversial, right? That people can get punished for how beautiful their hair is, and considering thousands and thousands of years back how hair has been documented in African cultures and rituals for our healing purposes, and now it's being used to punish us. So it's very unfortunate.
Absolutely, yeah. And I actually remember a conversation that I had with another Black male years ago. I'm on my second time of growing my locks out.
Okay.
And that time when I was growing them out, I was like at this transition period between like graduate school and becoming a psychologist. And obviously, like as you mentioned, like the like professionalism, quote unquote, piece came up. And I was actually shocked that this other Black male had like some concerns about like, would he feel comfortable working with a psychologist that had natural hair? And I was like, well, that's interesting, especially given that, I had some concerns about, going on the job market and a lot of the things that you sort of talked about. And so it's interesting to see, like, even sometimes in our own community, that these things can show up in terms of like the stigma or even some internalized racism that can show up in relation to Black hair.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But I'm sure that we all have these memories of hair experiences, whether we got praised for a hairstyle or critiqued and criticized for how our hair looked and how that got internalized. But to what degree are people perpetuating their own hair trauma to other people, especially in thinking about work life and this professional identity we even have as psychologists?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so like one thing that I'm really curious about, and I know a lot of parents might deal with this and how to like navigate this and talk with their kids about natural hair, or even as a parent, your decision to let your child's hair grow natural or not. And so in the news, as you sort of alluded to earlier, like we've seen instances where, you know, student athletes, they've been like forced to like cut their hair because they couldn't, it wasn't within the sports. I think the most recent thing I saw was like this swimmer, like there was some like penalty that she ensued because of her swim cap and her natural hair. And then I remember a year or two ago, there was an incident in Texas, like a valedictorian who had natural hair. They were like, didn't want him to like give his speech because of his natural hair, which seemed like, why does this have anything to do with him? Like he has the highest GPA in the school and he wants to, you know, address his classmates, but then all of a sudden, like his hair is an issue at that point. And so I'm curious about, you know, what suggestions can you offer parents around like, how do you support your kids, or what can you do in a situation where your kid is being teased about their natural hair, or even told like you need to cut your hair because it isn't professional or isn't within like the dress code or whatever.
It's sad that we have to have this conversation right now, but we'll go through it. I'm reminded of the quote by James Baldwin that I'll paraphrase, that children may not be the best listeners, but they never fail to imitate. And so I'm thinking about the role of parents in that way, in terms of how are they honoring their own appearance? How are they adorning themselves? How are they grooming themselves? It's very hard to encourage and support your child through their natural hair journey if you're not going through it with them. And so I think that there's that sort of parallel process as someone learns how to twist their hair, how to do Bantu knots, maybe if they start locks, to recognize that that could be a journey that the family goes through together. Thinking about how to even set up or design a bedroom. What are the images on the walls around you? I'm at my in-laws' house right now, but even seeing these, you know, positive Black images behind me about Black children being loved on, right? And having a variety of hairstyles. What books are you giving to your children to read? Does it reflect Black beauty and natural hair? Or even what television shows they're watching. I know that a few months ago, some cartoon, I'm forgetting what it is now, but had a whole song about bonnets and the importance of wearing your bonnet to bed to protect your hair while you're sleeping. But just even thinking about how we can expose children to certain media that's very affirming to Black beauty and good character. And so I'm thinking about the shaping in that way, or even introducing your children to Black professionals that are very successful, that have natural hair. I'm thinking about the television show or shows, plural at this time, that Tabitha Brown has, right? She has a children's show, but she's very much into her afro or her braids, or she even has hair products at this point. But thinking about, you know, Auntie Tab even being this successful and having such a beautiful crown. So I think about that process of just literally socializing Black children to love healthy Black hair.
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you're told that like something that grows naturally out of your head is wrong, it can definitely be detrimental, you know, to your self-esteem and mental health. And I think for me, that's one of the bigger concerns about these conversations, when I see like kids that are like forced to like get their hair shaved when they're in front of this large audience. Like it's so harmful. And it breaks my heart that adults can't see the harm that they're causing, but that's a different conversation that we can get into at another time. But I am glad to see that, you know, there are more people that are, you know, having conversations to protect, you know, people's rights to grow natural hair, and the work that you're doing to have these conversations and to highlight the importance of natural hair and beauty and how it impacts your identity. And so I'm curious, as we sort of wrap up, what are some things that you think that we can continue to do as a society, or as parents, as individuals who don't identify within the Black community, to really challenge the narrative around sort of the negative stigma with natural hair?
Yeah, I love this question in terms of everyone can play a role and a part, whether you're an activist or an ally for Black people. I say look up to see if your state has passed the Crown Act. So the Crown Act stands for creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. So creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. And so this act has basically passed, I think, in 17 or 18 states, but that's nowhere close to the majority. I think it passed in the House of Representatives, but not in the Senate. But to think about how you can go to Dove or thecrownact.com and sign the petition, how can you contact local state legislators to see if you can testify on the importance of the Crown Act and how it impacts your child or your community or your student or family. I think that's really important. But of course, laws are only as good as those that can be enforced, right? And so thinking about when you're noticing or observing negative talk, even that a child's experienced negative self-talk, to, you know, challenge that thought, where did that come from? To recondition and re-socialize them around here, but even thinking about creating opportunities to process conversations, because most hair discrimination experiences happen at school. And so what becomes the task of parents and teachers and community members to have programming spaces, group spaces to process, to maybe have a barber or hairstylist come to the school and do demonstrations. So to be really creative in thinking about ways that you can affirm Black people and Black hair.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really good point that you touched on about like, how do we create these affirming spaces? And for parents and teachers to affirm their kids if they do have natural hair or want to grow their natural hair, and to not make statements or comments about, well, you're going to get teased, or, you know, why do you want to do that to your hair? I can just sort of see those types of comments being made, and that it's not helpful for kids. And so I think, you know, all of those points that you mentioned are important. And I'll be sure to also list a link in the comment section for people to get more information about the Crown Act and how they can sort of advocate for some of this in their states and communities as well. So before we wrap up, just wanted to see if there were any other gems that you wanted to leave our audience with before we wrapped up today, and also let them know how they can connect with you and learn more about your work.
Okay, but thanks for creating that space. Yeah, I'd like to encourage parents to especially get certifications and training. So for example, Dr. Marva Lewis, who I collaborate with at Tulane University, has a program called Talk, Touch, and Listen that's specifically for parents in negotiating hair with their children. Talk, touch, and listen. Basically, this is a daily activity that parents can go through in terms of styling their children's hair, and what conversations can happen during that moment to strengthen emotional bonds and connections. So look up Talk, Touch, and Listen, but also parents and teachers especially can become certified in psychotherapy. So just like I was saying, I developed something where I use hair as an entry point into mental health. I actually train parents and teachers in learning more about the history of our hair, identifying signs and symptoms of mental health concerns in adolescents and children, but also how to engage in active listening through that hair care process as well. So you can find out more at psychoharapy.org, my website, and follow Instagram at PsychoHairapy to find out more hair and health related information.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that and those resources. And I'll be sure to post those as well. And the last point I'll make too before we wrap up is what you touched on about having that conversation. I think that, you know, one of the things that sometimes comes up often for me working with families is that parents don't know how to bring up conversations around like mental health. And so I think like that, what those points that you talked on about, like as you're doing the hair, can be really helpful to like, let's talk about some things. And it can be less intimidating for both you and the child if you're doing it in that manner, as opposed to like, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation. Like, how are you feeling today? Are you stressed out? Like, and they're like, no, I'm okay. But I think if you're like engaging in like doing the hair, like it makes it sort of an easier topic to be able to talk about. So I appreciate you sharing that. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share information on this topic. And be sure to tune in for the next episode in our Back to School series.